a lot of people get to a point in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, now even in their 20s, where they're confused about why they're feeling stuck, why they're experiencing depression, why they're experiencing anxiety, because the dysfunction isn't overt. Over time, that desire to achieve or have more success, I call it the more monster, right? It becomes insatiable. Like, the more quote unquote successful someone was, oftentimes the deeper pain that they were in. Like, do you have to hit a rock bottom in order to then begin the journey of self-awareness and transformation? What I've seen historically is that, yes, that's the case, right? Sort of the mathematics of reality beats the drum of pain and discomfort louder and louder and louder until we're proverbially brought to our knees and there's nowhere to look but up. What I've been seeing more recently, though, is we have a generation of young people who are coming on board that are having exposure to these concepts before the deep patterns and pains set in. From the time we're born, right? You cry because that's your authentic experience of, having your toy taken away. And what do your parents say? Don't cry. So there's this denial of our own experience of reality that starts from the very, very beginning. We express our joy as children and we're told to what? Calm down. When you really look at what's happening right now at a mass scale, is humanity is living in a reality that's not even real. We're viewing the experiences of our life through a lens that alters them, and at a fundamental level, we've been taught to deny the experience itself. And it's no wonder that we become so fascinated with, the machine that sits in our pocket and viewing other people's lives and their experiences, because we've essentially unlearned how to experience life for ourselves. And then when we experience life for ourselves and the emotions of it, it can become shocking. I'm still learning to be willing to be with how I feel, because a lot of times it's not particularly comfortable. Now, I do think that there's a difference between noticing as an emotion comes up with you and being willing to be with it and to accept it and to accept yourself, and indulging in emotions that don't feel good. I have a significant amount of anxiety before I get on stage. We do large events, there's thousands of people. So I have a lot of anxiety before I get on stage and doubt about whether or not I'm going to deliver the content well, or trusting myself. Or I do live coaching where someone I've never met will stand up in the audience and share that they've been depressed or anxious or they're on the brink of divorce, and I'll coach them through it. There's a lot of uncertainty in that environment. And so I used to want to be a person who wasn't anxious. I used to try to convince myself to not doubt myself. I used to try to affirm myself into, essentially creating certainty where there wasn't certainty. And that just creates a lot of resistance. And what I've learned over time is to just accept and love the fact that I have a part of me that gets anxious, there are parts of me that get overwhelmed, and there's parts of me that doubt. And I don't allow those parts to drive my prefrontal cortex. But what I found is, as I accept those and then bring those parts forward with me, while being who I actually know myself to be as well, which is someone who believes in faith and trusts my vision and can understand that every time there was uncertainty, it created something beautiful, right? I allow that part of me to make the decisions, but I no longer deny myself of how I feel. Vision is absolutely essential. There was a time in our business recently where I keep my vision in my journal. I map my business vision on a whiteboard that sits in my office. I have a vision for my relationship. I have a vision for my life. I have a vision for my bank account. I have a vision for my impact. I have a vision for the work that I'm doing in the human evolution space. And I think with everything that happened with COVID-19, that year, I lost sight of my vision. We moved into so many pivots and just really trying to serve our community and make sure we could survive as a business. And there was such a disruption of the day-to-day norms that we were used to. I was sharing with my wife, who runs and is president of our company. I said, things have felt stagnant recently, ever since January when we did the 2021 Bulletproof Business Challenge. And this was now 7 months later. And she said, yeah, things have felt stagnant. They felt uninspired. And I went into the garage a couple of nights later and I saw the whiteboard that was normally in my office, which was in the garage because we were back in our second home and we had moved. And I looked at the whiteboard and it was the last time that I had done it. And the last month was the January with the 2021 Bulletproof Business Challenge. And it shocked me. I understand how important vision is. And what's interesting is that, vision and imagination are so powerful because the brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So when you give yourself permission to envision a future, you literally start building memories in your brain of events that haven't happened yet. You start to create neural networks of your future. And so, think about how incredibly powerful that is. It almost sounds like something out of an Avengers movie. And so that change in your brain that holds the vision of the future now is what starts to tune you into the thoughts and the ideas that will bridge the gap between the now and the future. It begins to alter your perception so that you pay attention to things that will bridge the gap between now and the future. You begin to program your unconscious mind with that future. And so you start making decisions that you're not even aware of that become the bridge between now and that future. So vision is essential. And it reminds me of a quote that I think was attributed to Dwight D. Eisenhower that said, "Plans are useless, planning is essential." Every vision board I ever created, and I like to create the timing, January through December, what I'm going to achieve, when I'm going to do it. Never have I ever achieved even close to everything on that vision board. But what I did achieve was amazing. But the absence of the vision board for just 6 months in my life brought everything to a screeching halt. And that, again, just shocks me. It's profound. And so sometimes people will get vision board burnout because they're like, well, I'm creating the vision, but that's not what I actually created in my life. And I would say that's not actually really the important part. Just keep holding the vision. Over time, you'll get there. But in the meantime, you'll create extraordinary things that you absolutely love because you're going through the planning process for your future, right? The actual results of the plan as well. And so people get it backwards. They're like, well, I don't know how I'm going to create a successful business, or I don't know how I'm going to have an amazing relationship, or I don't know how I'm going to find my soulmate. And so because I don't know how, I'm not going to indulge imagination or vision. And so they end up getting stuck because that how that they're looking for comes through the changing of your brain as a result of imagination. Personal development is not that complicated at the end of the day. And I think personal development and mindset isn't even an appropriate name for what we're talking about. This thing called mindset is the linchpin of the evolution of the human species. We're talking about a species that has evolved, that can receive intelligence or life or spirit itself into itself, like all living organisms. All living organisms have structures, ours is the brain, that can receive life into the body. But the human being is unique because the human being is actually aware of its own thinking, right? The human being has this thing that we've named mind. And so we have the ability to actually question our thinking and change our thinking. And when we change our thinking, we actually change our brain. We're a self-re-engineering species. There isn't anything else like it that we've seen on the planet. And so this is part of our evolutionary process. We are now beginning to learn how to rewire our brain and redesign our nervous systems. And that is the evolutionary leap, because we share with other species, for the most part, the fight or flight mechanism, right? It's built in instinctually. We talked about before, two states of being, powerful states and primal states. That maps to the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. You're either in rest and relaxation and regeneration, which is your place of power, which is where you're actually connected directly to the source of all intelligence and that greater part of you, because you're at rest, or you're in tension, right? You're in fight or flight. And so what we're talking about is our own individual capacity to begin to dehabituate ourselves from fight or flight, to start to change our thinking so that we're not reacting as much, so that we're in natural flow states, so that we give the body the space it needs to heal itself. The vast majority of disease is caused by being in unnecessary prolonged periods of fight or flight. It used to be that we'd be in fight or flight when we were threatened, right, from a mortal threat. Now you're in fight or flight because you're sitting in the cafe looking at the menu, wanting to order the croissant, and feeling like you shouldn't because you're overweight or you weigh more than you'd like to, and you've been trying to diet, but you don't know if you should cheat. And you go through this whole conversation in your head. Literally, the most mundane things move us into fight or flight. And so that's breaking us down as a species. And so it's a call for evolution. And at the core of all of it is to relax. Nature needs no help, just no resistance. What's the resistance and how do we remove it? That's very different than feeling like you actually need to be something that you're not, that there's something you have to acquire, a skill you need to develop, that you need to somehow become more. You're already all you need to be. There's just some resistance. And so we need to identify the resistance and remove it. When we do, courage naturally exists. When we do, compassion naturally exists. When we do, wealth naturally exists. When we do, intelligence naturally exists. So we're not trying to become more wealthy or become more intelligent or become more compassionate or become more courageous. We're just trying to figure out what's preventing all of that which is naturally inside of us from being our experience. And so the way through it again, and there's a lot of roads to the top of the mountain, just found this to be my experience is most efficient because I spent years trying to feel better in personal development unsuccessfully, is to understand a couple of things. Number one, as we mentioned before, that there's only two states of emotion, powerful states and primal states. The parasympathetic nervous system is active and the sympathetic nervous system is active. And the name of the game is to be in parasympathetic more, to be in a powerful state. And so we said, okay, got it. So what causes me to move into a primal state? Stress, anxiety, overwhelm, anger, jealousy. And what we see is that it's not the experiences of your life, it's the meaning that you're given. So that's kind of step two. Take responsibility that you are the architect of your own emotional experience, and that the only thing causing your emotions is the meaning that you're given, whatever you're experiencing. What we also found was not only is the only cause of all of your personal suffering your own thinking, but that the quality of the thinking is that it's 100% of the time untrue. So your nervous system is designed to move you into a primal state, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, when you're entangling with thoughts or ideas that aren't in alignment with the resonance of reality. Reality has a resonance. When something doesn't go the way that you expect it to, you move into a primal state because you misunderstand that it's going exactly the way it should go. And so this is another way of describing acceptance and surrender to life. But how can you accept and surrender to life if you doubt that life is working for you? So when you begin to entertain notions that life is not working for you, it creates dissonant energy in your body. It's not in alignment with the energy of reality itself. Think of it as a plus and a minus. The beautiful infinite intelligence of life that's always working for you in every experience you have, even when your girlfriend breaks up with you, and even when you lose your job, and even when you lose a loved one, and even when you have a diagnosis of a disease, and when things are not going the way that you expect it to. Life is actually always working for you. That's a positive energy. But when you have this idea that it should be other than what it is, and that life is somehow a problem, that's a negative energy. And you experience that dissonance in your nervous system as a primal state. The most important decision you make is whether you live in a friendly or hostile universe. The most important decision you can make is whether life is working for you, moment by moment, for your greatest growth, your greatest prosperity, your greatest evolution, or not. But your brain is looking for efficiency. So if you can actually experience that your limiting belief makes no sense, it blows those neural networks out pretty quickly. The brain goes, there's really no need for us to go back to that as frequent. If you can be aware that you believe money's hard to make, or that you can't trust people, or that there's not enough time, right? But so what? The next step is to say, well, this feeling that I don't have enough time doesn't feel good. So it must not be true. So the opposite must be true. And then you'd go, well, but I do have enough time? How could that be true? And you start to really discover new philosophies for yourself. For example, I used to be overwhelmed all the time. And if you look at overwhelm, the belief behind it is, there's not enough time. I'm not going to get it all done. If I don't get it all done, I will fail. It will fail. I will be a failure. And I have no help, and I'm doing it all alone. That's generally the recipe for overwhelm. But none of that's true. The truth is that I'm co-creating with intelligence. That synchronicities and coincidences have shown up throughout my entire life. That oftentimes when I thought I needed to get something done on a timeline, I learned later that the timeline wasn't really the timeline. It was just something I made up in my head. That so many times resources have shown up at the 11th hour to support me in accomplishing something I needed to accomplish. That in those times where I wasn't able to accomplish it on time, I was able to look back and see that that was absolutely perfect, because it changed the way that I actually did it when I finally got it done. And so now when I'm overwhelmed, I noticed the thinking that shows up that tells me if I don't get it all done, I'm going to fail. But I also have this capacity now to go, but that's not even true. What's true is I put in a solid effort and I do the best I can today, and I surrender the rest till tomorrow, right? So that's going beyond self-awareness. That's changing your perception of reality. It's changing your fundamental beliefs. We're using a simple process and tool set that now allows me to relax when I used to be overwhelmed. Right? The irony, of course, is that if you're overwhelmed, you will run out of time because you're not operating from an efficient and powerful place. So that's why I said the key to everything is to return to a relaxation. A relaxation is a connection with reality, with what's real, right? And what's real is life doesn't demand more from us than we're able to deliver in the time that we're allotted. You have to have a philosophy. And we talked about a piece of the philosophy. Life's always working for me. It's a powerful piece of the philosophy. Number two, you have to understand how you operate, right? That the thoughts that you think are happening automatically as a reaction to the experiences that you're having. And that any thought you're having that's causing you to move into primal state or not feel good is a limiting belief. Right? And then it's to begin questioning your own thinking through that lens. Say, okay, if life is always working for me and this thinking is causing me to move into a primal state, it's not true, but it seems true to me, right? Now you begin to explore the thinking. Are there other possibilities about what's going on right now? And so that's, for me, that's the process, because ultimately from there, you can start to make some new decisions. We teach a concept called the power of decision, which is that the moment you decide something new, it radically transforms your experience of life. So if we can get you to decide that money's easy to make, then all of a sudden you'll start having thoughts and ideas about making money easily. The part of your brain called the reticular activating system that's been paying attention to how hard it is to make money will recalibrate and start paying attention to easy ways to make money. So you'll start perceiving opportunities. And then you'll also start creating synchronicities and coincidences to make money easily. Right? Decisions are powerful. But in order to free yourself up to do that, you've also got to be able to see that your previous belief that money was hard to make is unintelligent and doesn't make any sense. So if I was going to give someone something simple to walk away with, it would be it's not a simple conversation. I don't want to, there are a lot of tools that teachers are putting out there as the quick takeaway, right? And I think in many ways it does more harm than good for people, because they collect all of these individual hacks, but they're still experiencing a significant amount of unintelligent thinking patterns, and they don't know how to change them. And so my biggest takeaway for people usually is to be aware that there are only two states of being, and that anytime you've moved into a primal state, it's because you're entangled with a limiting belief. And to identify the limiting belief and to explore what the opposite would be. And to see if you can actually find evidence for the fact that the opposite is more true than the limiting belief. It's not a cure-all. So do people go through it and describe it as a hack? Yes, but it's not drink 20 ounces of water in the morning with a little bit of sea salt.